There's a lot of really great organizations out there that are doing some amazing things to make this world a better place, including the organization Family Promise. Now today I've got the Executive Director for Family Promise Salt Lake City. I got Brian Diggs with me, and Brian's been doing this now for about a year. So Brian, first off, tell me a little bit about what Family Promise is and how you got involved.
Yeah, I got involved actually 25 years ago when I moved to Utah. I'm a United Methodist clergy person, and I packed up the family, moved from Virginia all the way to Salt Lake City. And normally when you get into a new community, they want pastors to be on various boards. And so I was voluntold by my congregation that I would be a part of the board of Family Promise. Again, this was back in 1997. I immediately fell in love with Family Promise because I felt like I was making a difference in the lives of children and their parents right here in the community where I live. And so I just jumped right in. Over the years, I've been involved with it as a pastor, but now as the executive director, I'm so excited to see where Family Promise is going right now.
And where we look at Family Promise, I mean, it's been around for over 30 years, started in New Jersey, it's in 200 plus communities in 43 different states. There's a lot of demand here to help people that are experiencing homelessness, especially families in this particular case. What is the demand like here in Utah?
Well, a lot of times, Warren, when people think about homelessness, they think about the guy standing on the corner, with a cardboard sign. A single male, actually, is what most people think about. But a lot of people don't understand is that family homelessness is growing by leaps and bounds. You just don't see it because they're generally sleeping in their cars, at friends' houses. So the fastest rising population is family homelessness. And Family Promise seeks to address just that. We actually are in our 27th year of existence here in Salt Lake City, and we've helped dozens and dozens of families get back on their feet. I think one of the strengths of Family Promise, though, is that it's not just a shelter. A lot of people think, well, we're going to put somebody in emergency shelter and they're going to be okay and we don't have to deal with it. Family Promise really wants that wraparound services, and so we utilize the community to be able to help these homeless families. We do that by utilizing local churches. So we have a network of 12 churches from Bountiful all the way to Sandy, Utah. And those churches take turns housing our families. The great thing about that, though, is those families actually can come to our offices, we call it the Day Center, where they work with a case manager to do things like find gainful employment, find appropriate schools or daycare for their children, and then also, and finally, to work on finding sustainable housing. And that's really key, especially in today's economy.
I think what really excites me about what Family Promise does is this is not Band-Aid fixes. We're not going to try and just put you in a shelter and be like, that's all we have to do, and then walks away from the situation. This is a well-rounded, holistic approach to give people the tools they need to feel like they can move to the next step, get gainful employment, have the home, have the support, and have the safety that they need for their families. Now, you mentioned COVID is kind of putting a little bit of a kibosh to a lot of the programs that you have done so far, but how are you guys able to navigate during a pandemic and still be able to assist people where we're seeing quite a bit of spike with homelessness, especially here in Utah?
Absolutely, yeah. We really had to pivot when COVID hit, because think about this, if you're actually housing people in these churches, and these churches aren't meeting, you can't really house families in there because we actually utilize volunteers from those congregations to come in and be with those families. So these volunteers from these congregations cook dinner, they play games with the children, help with homework. They're oftentimes a listening ear. There's a sleepover host that stays at the church with those families. And then at 7 a.m. they leave those churches and go to their jobs, schools, or to the day center with us. So to backtrack, as you can imagine, if these churches aren't meeting, it's really hard to place them in churches. Yeah. We do have a couple of churches, though, that agreed to house families during the pandemic. We call it our static site model. So instead of these families rotating from church to church with emergency shelter, they stay in place during COVID. And so we just bring volunteers to them. Right now we have a couple of families. Well, we actually have 5 units as well at Family Promise Salt Lake. So all 5 of those units are actually occupied in what we call our transitional housing program. That's different from our emergency shelter program. And then we have 2 churches that are providing emergency shelter. So we're in the process of reestablishing that rotation. We're even thinking about maybe moving our model to a static site rotation, meaning instead of these families moving from church to church, we had the volunteers rotate to them so the families stay put. That's important for a couple of reasons. One, it increases our impact. So we can actually house more families. If you think about it, if you have 3 or 4 families that are moving from church to church, if we have 3 or 4 churches that can house 3 or 4 families, we're doubling, tripling, quadrupling the number of families that we can help. But I think just as importantly, when you have a static site setting, it really does, it plays into what case managers oftentimes call trauma-informed case management. So when you're moving children every Sunday to the next church, psychologically that can take its toll on children and adults for that matter. So if you keep those families safe and in the same place, have volunteers rotate to them, it really does help alleviate some of the suffering these kids are going through.
That's a fantastic idea. I love that you are looking at this from a psychological point of view and not just the financial point of view. Now let's talk about some of the underlying cases of why these people may be experiencing homelessness at this point. What are some of the prevailing reasons where families are experiencing homelessness today?
Yeah, I think number one, and I'll tell an anecdotal story. I was in my backyard with my kids who are in their 20s. I have a 12-year-old, but I have 2 kids in their 20s, 25, 22. And they were over for a cookout. And we were talking about the housing cost in the area that I live in. It, like most of Utah, it's exploded. And I said to them, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but not really, it's true. It's like, hey guys, I don't know if you're ever going to be able to buy a house in Utah. I mean, the housing costs are so expensive. And of course, that bleeds right over into rental costs as well. My daughter just moved out of our house into a rental. Luckily, she has roommates, but she's got a tiny 2-bedroom apartment near Liberty Park. It's going to be about $1,300 a month. That's a lot of money. Yeah, that's a lot of money. So I think number one, housing costs in Utah. When you think about the families that we serve, oftentimes they don't have those job skills or the education to be able to get one of those jobs that would allow them to afford that $1,300 a month rent payment or even a mortgage. So I think the rising costs would be number one. Then I think secondly, oftentimes the families that we work with are in what I call, the cycle of poverty. And so they were raised in this way, and it's really all they know. Like one of the things I say is, you just don't know what you don't know. My son went on a study abroad while he was an undergrad in London, England. Study abroads existed when I was in college way back in the 80s. But I bet you I never saw that poster in the student union or in the cafeteria because I'd never heard of a study abroad. So I think a lot of our families are dealing with just that. They don't know what it looks like. And it's a scary thing if you think about it. They don't know what it looks like to say, hey, I want to move from this job that pays me $15 an hour at this restaurant to move up to that next level, because it's just something that their parents never taught them. I always say this, it never occurred to me, not even once, when I was growing up, that I wouldn't go to college. It just was never an option because both my parents had master's degrees and they just expected me to go.
Sure.
Same with my sisters. But I think a lot of that wasn't the case with all my friends growing up. I just didn't realize it at the time. And I think a lot of the families that we deal with just don't know about the options. So Family Promise wants to present these options to them, to show them how they can climb that ladder financially.
There's a program that you guys do where people graduate from Family Promise. And so that means that there's a program that they have to participate in to graduate.
Absolutely.
That's how this works. What happens in that program to help them become more successful?
Yeah, great question. So if a family meets or qualifies to be in our emergency shelter program, they have 30 days. Not 30 days. I know that 90 days.
90 days.
3 months is what I wanted to say.
That's much more workable.
Yeah.
Much more workable.
Yeah, they have 90 days to work with us in our offices with our case management to be able to find that affordable housing, to make sure their kids are stable, to find gainful employment. So really what we're trying to do is to engage the community during that 3-month process to make sure they're surrounded with the resources. They know these resources to help them move on. We also have 5 transitional housing units, as I mentioned before. And if a family graduates from emergency shelter, they can apply for transitional housing. It's really like applying for an apartment. So they would fill out those forms, and then we would move them if they qualify into one of those 5 units. We start them off with a very small, we don't call it a rental payment, we call it a transitional housing fee. But we start them off at a level that they can afford. And then we just keep increasing month by month their payment to us, so that by the time they leave in 6 months, they will have reached that fair rental value point, so they feel comfortable moving out into their own place. And then I think finally one of the strengths of Family Promise too is our graduate services program. So once they have found sustainable housing in emergency shelter or in our transitional housing program, we encourage them to continue to work with our case management folks so that they don't fall back into the same cycles that got them homeless in the first place. So we want to continue to use community resources, our offices, to make sure these families remain housed and healthy.
I love it. Now let's talk about real quickly, there's a lot of people who are watching this right now and they would love to get more information as to what's going on at Family Promise and how they can help. What resources are out there so that they can get more information and help out with what Family Promise is already doing?
Yeah, first of all, so just visit our website. It's familypromisesaltlake.org. You can find, again, I've only been here a year, and I was a staff of 1 for most of that year. So now we have our case manager. We've had a part-time bookkeeper. So we're getting back on track, and I'm excited about that. So there are a few tweaks we need to make to our website, but if you go to our website, you can see the basic structure there. You can see what we do. Money is always what people need. That's for sure. So we have a donation button on there if you'd like to give to us. There's even a roundup option now that I'm excited about. Just put it on there. So you can actually attach your credit card to this option, set a limit, whether it's $25 a month or $50 a month or even more. Each time you use that credit card, it rounds it up. And so once you hit that mark that you set, then it stops taking that money off your credit card. So that's an easy way for folks to give to us financially. Then I think we also need volunteers. One of the things that we're looking to do is to greatly expand our volunteer pool. So over the last 27 years, we've really kind of focused on having these 12 churches using their church members to volunteer to help out, and then surrounding churches. So we have wards that are near these hosting congregations that will bring in food, cook meals, and so it really is a community effort. But what we want to do is to think even beyond just faith communities here in Utah. So we want to hit up civic organizations. We're the Binion Center at the University of Utah to get students involved, because I just believe that there are so many good-hearted people out there that want to engage in this humanitarian work, whether they go to a church or not. That would be a great fit as a volunteer at Family Promise. So finances, volunteers, that's really what we need right now.
I think I might even take you up on some of that volunteering. I think it would be a blast, even just to take my family, who has experienced a lot of the same hardships. I know I personally was homeless for a while, and it was a moment where I was embarrassed to even talk about it. It was a lot of shame that was involved, but the neat thing is there is hope down the line. Eventually, when you get on your feet and you've gotten to a place where you're not afraid of where you're going to live, where your next paycheck's going to come from, how you're going to feed yourself, that whole hierarchy of needs sort of deal.
Yeah.
Once you figure that out and have been able to graduate past that scary moment in your life gets really, really exciting, guys. It really does. And I love that Family Promise is an organization that's there to help. And I'd love to be able to show my kids that this is a moment that people will remember the kindness of others. Coming in, helping with the meals, helping get a room ready, getting the beds ready, cleaning up. I think all those things as far as volunteers go is outstanding. Financial contributions, I love the roundup option. That's fantastic. It's pretty much, if I understand this correctly, I go off and I buy a movie ticket for $13.43. Then it takes the 43 cents up to the $14 mark, and that's what's being donated up to a certain point. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it takes that little bit of money. So you never really miss it. so to speak,
Yeah.
and you set that limit. So let's say your budget's not that large. You could even do $10 and say, my debit card or credit card is going to round up, and when it hits that $10 mark, it stops taking that money off each month. So it starts off every month.
It's like the money charity jar that you have at the house. Like all your pennies and quarters and stuff got put in. Now everything's digital. Now we could just put it all. I love this idea.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic idea. And I'm so excited you guys are doing that. Okay, so one more time. Tell everybody where to go to get more information about Family Promise in Salt Lake. And that way they can know what to do.
Yeah, and by the way, I always ask people if they email me, can I add you to our constituency list? Because we send out a monthly a monthly newsletter via email. And that newsletter is on our website as well. So again, the website is Family Promise Salt Lake, not Salt Lake City, just FamilyPromiseSaltLake.org. Feel free to email me, call me. You'll see all that information on the website as well. I'm excited to make a difference. For the last 11 years, I worked in humanitarian aid, but really I didn't get to travel. I didn't get my hands muddy. It wasn't in my community. And as a now 25-year, what would it be called? Salt Lake Cityan? Salt Laker? I guess a Salt Laker.
Yeah,
I'm a Salt Laker now. Not an LA Laker. I'm a jazz guy. But I just think as somebody who's involved in this community, I just think it's important to get your hands muddy right here because there's so much need in our community.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I agree. It's a great impact to help people right here in our backyard, our neighbors that we're going to have a regular contact with. And I think it's amazing that you guys have this organization that exists. It's been here for 25 years, and now it's just expanding and helping more and more people.
Yeah, and you hit on something that I think is really important, Warren, is that hope. I think we're living in an age where hope's getting thinner and thinner. At times, we are just becoming more individualistic and separate. Communities aren't as strong as they used to be. Well, I think one of the strengths of Family Promise is that it's using the community. It's that wraparound approach that shows these families that there's something out there for them that they maybe couldn't see before. And so that's what really excites me.
Excellent. All right, guys. The link to Family Promise is also in the descriptions below on this video. So go ahead and click on it and see what you can do if you're interested in volunteering and helping out. Brian, thanks for being on the show. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to some more amazing people that are making huge differences in our community. Thanks for watching, guys.